I heard it said one time, you can't give what you don't have. And it's kind of that oxygen mask thing. It's like, to a certain extent, I am the best father, the best husband when I have also taken care of myself. I'm a better dad when I'm a healthy dad. I'm a better dad when I live longer, when everybody who works out knows like the endorphins and the
Right.
way you conduct your day and just who you are as a person like changes when you take care of yourself.
MyCore is on a mission to be the world's most people-centric company. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the core of people. I'm your host, Nathan Bourne, and I invite you to join me as we deep dive into the personal and professional lives of our guests. We're going to learn who they are, why they exist, and what they do. We're going to hear their stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. In other words, we're going to talk to some really cool people. Welcome to the MyCore podcast. Hello. What's happening? Nathan Bourne here with Haden Roberts. What's up, man?
Man, just surviving.
Thriving. I like to say a little combo of survival and thriving, right? This is convo number 012 with Haden Roberts. And I'm pumped to hang out with you, man. Pumped to meet you. Pierce, who is a mutual friend of ours, introduced us. He was in conversation number, I believe it was 003. And he had been telling me about you, said you really got to meet Haden. He's an interesting guy, totally aligned with how you roll. And I'm stoked to spend this time with you, man.
Yeah, likewise, man. I'm appreciative of the time. And I know, inviting people on your podcast is probably not something you take lightly. And so, yeah, just glad to be here.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah. So I was curious because I think we have some things in common, which is cool, particularly around mentality, mindset, our faith, just kind of the way we view the world and show up in it. So give me some demographics. How old are you, man?
I am almost 35. I've got a couple more weeks of 34 left in me.
Okay, cool, man. Yeah, I just turned 36.
There you go. And, firmly in middle-aged them, unfortunately.
It's weird, right, man? It's 35, mid-30s, weird time.
Yeah, dude. I was telling you this beforehand when we were chatting. Like, I started doing jiu-jitsu a couple years ago, and one of the guys in my class that I roll with a lot is a younger guy, and his birthday was a couple weeks ago. I'm like, dude, how old are you? He's like, I'm 17. I'm like, dude, I'm literally twice as old as you. Like, it just hit me all of a sudden. Like, I could be your dad and you're a senior in high school. It's a weird feeling.
Bro, my stepson is 17. He's a junior in high school. And I'm having these conversations with him because he's, going off to college in just a year. And he's asking me about college. And I'm like giving him like what it was like to wrestle in school and fraternity. And I'm like, this was not that long ago, right? And then I'm like, that was a long time ago. Like, I will have my 20-year high school reunion, and he will be graduating high school in 2006. So it's a weird thing where we are not old, but we are not young.
Yeah, it is kind of sobering, actually. I have young kids, and everybody says like, you blink and they get old, and I'm like, well, my daughter turns 3 this weekend, and I'm like, I was in the hospital room with you yesterday. Like, right. It really is. It is true. Like, the year. What do they say? The days are long, but the years are short. It's like, that's a sobering reality when you get into your, mid to upper 30s.
Yeah. And you would think that like you could stop talking about it. It's kind of like the weather. Like, how there'll be like, what are you going to talk about the weather on a Zooming? Like, I really do want to know what the weather is where you are. Like I don't really ever grow sick of talking about how depressing and wonderful and sobering and awesome this thing called life is. I mean, that's really what the purpose of the MyCore podcast is to kind of get to the core of people, get to the core of issues. And sometimes it gets a little bit therapeutic for both parties. So, if there's a glistening tear here or there, no judgment, meaning it'll probably be me crying. So don't judge me. But tell me about you, man. So you are married and you have 3 children?
Mm-hmm. I do. Yeah. My wife and I actually just had our 10-year anniversary.
That's awesome.
2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So then we have a 6 year old, a 4 year old, and a 3 year old. So the two littles are almost Irish twins. So uh, yeah, we're getting our butt kicked right now, man. Like someone's always screaming in our house. I literally just texted my wife, like, I'm on a podcast right now. Please keep the kids upstairs. Like we're firmly in that season of life right now, which is fun.
I can relate because we have 5 children
Goodness
and
gracious.
we have 17, 11, 9, 6, and 2. So like the whole gamut. I mean, we're
How?
navigating the craziest things right now.
Yeah, dude, that's you're a lot like they talk about the switch from man to zone, like the jump from 2 to 3 kids.
Yeah.
And my wife and I are like, dude, we're getting our butts kicked with three, like, and then our friends that have 4 or 5 are like, how are y'all even doing this, man? Like, what's the give me the dad tips?
Zone defense, man. It's I have to give credit where credit's due. So we divide and conquer. We have really clear roles, and it's funny how things are always like I don't know greener, but just different on the other side because we have 5 children, but I can't imagine if my wife worked.
Yeah,
So like I'm like how I know this sounds like insane to say, but I'm like, how do women work? Like how does a woman? And then I'm thinking like, oh, I guess I don't do the dad duties that most men do, so I get off the hook in this other area, maybe. But at the same time, too, the weekends are way harder.
yeah,
I mean, they're precious because you get the time, but like for me as the
for sure.
entrepreneur and just like where my mentality is all the time, it is hard for me on the weekend compared to like the work week.
Oh, dude, 100%. Like you say, like your wife doesn't work, and I started to be like, yeah, mine doesn't either. I'm like, actually, no, she works way more than I do. Like
Yeah.
her job is 24/7. Like I usually get to Sunday night and I'm like, dude, I'm so ready to go back to work tomorrow. Like I need to be around other adults and like, I love my kids dearly. They're a lot of work
Yeah,
though.
that's not the right way to put it. That I wish there was like a better, like in the English language, we had a better way to say it because we always have to like then qualify it for just super obvious reasons. Because it's like, wait, they way outwork us, like we have, like I went and got lunch today with a guy that is a friend. He's actually, working with our company in a certain capacity, and we like talked about life and fatherhood. And now I'm doing a podcast with you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, was that hard? But at the same time, it is because of the mental rigor that it takes to do. We're not digging ditches in our line of work, but it is tiring too. So to balance it all, to integrate it all, it's a little bit nuts right now at this stage, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if y'all have the same, spousal dynamic that we do, but like there are times where we're like, whose day was harder? Like you kind of get into that competition. Like
Yeah.
my kids are screaming. I'm like, well, yeah, but I lost this deal and had this fire that I had to put out. And then you're kind of like, hey, it's not a competition. Like we can both have had hard days, and like that's okay. you know,
Right. There's enough hard to go around.
for sure.
Yeah. We say this thing amongst our executive team, but I think it's fitting in marriage too, where we say, look, it's okay to quit. We can all quit. We just can't quit on the same day.
Yep, that's a good one.
Right. So it's like we all get our turn. So I think the way you said that is interesting because it's like whose day was harder. It's really like who's quitting today. Like, and then all right, you get to quit today. I'll step up and but
And
tomorrow I might.
yeah, isn't that the beautiful thing about marriage though? Is like there's days where I get home and maybe it's been a bad day and like things with the kids are going on. I'm just like, I just need a minute. She's like, go, you're good.
Yeah.
And then there's plenty of days where I get home and I walk in the back door and she's like, they're yours. Like, that's
Yeah.
right. Fine, babe. Go on the back porch, get a glass of wine, like take an hour. And I think about like single parents. I'm like, dude, you don't have that outlet. Like, I don't know how single parents are doing it. Like, that's a tough gig.
Yeah. I concur. It's the other thing I think that's interesting about parenting, or at least millennials parenting. And I don't know. I think the verdict is still out because, like, we're spending way more time with our children than our parents did. And that's
True.
noble. And I'm assuming this is good. You know what I mean? Like, I'm assuming that this is right. But
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder, like, are we overcorrecting? Like our parents, like I feel a lot of guilt around
Yes.
fatherhood because of my commitment to business and entrepreneurship, and I manage a lot of relationships. So I struggle, just full transparency, with like being present and um, and just the demands of providing for a family of seven and having a team of over 50 people, and like just all the things that come with leadership and
Mhm.
fathership, fatherhood. And I'm like trying not to compare it, but I'm like, dude, I would not see my dad for like extended periods of time, like, and my parents were married, they didn't split. So I just wonder, like, if this is sustainable, the amount of presence. This is like not a fun topic, and I feel like a jerk even saying it. You know what I mean? I'm like, maybe we edit this out, but like, maybe we're like putting a little too much pressure on ourselves. I
Yeah.
wonder.
I no, I think you're 100% on to something. I notice it more so in my wife, where she has a hard time stepping away. So like maybe like I vividly remember this one week where like she had had a really hard week. I felt like I hadn't been around a ton, and like I think I even may have gone and played golf with some buddies.
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, I want to give you one here. Like tonight's your night, babe. Like go out, do whatever you want. I got the kids. You go do your thing. And she was just like, I don't even know what I would do. Like she's she's so here and so present that like she had a hard time stepping away, and like I don't know if it was a guilt thing or just or what, but I felt that at times too, where I'm like, if I do want to go have dinner with a friend or somebody, or do something for myself, there is that inner kind of check in your spirit where you're like, but do I need to be home right now? Like,
Right.
have I seen my kids enough? You feel guilty for it. So I don't know. I don't know what the right answer to that
I was gonna
is.
say, I'm convinced we don't have an answer to this. like
And I
most
think,
things, I feel pretty conclusive about, and I'm like, no, I feel pretty. I have no idea, because on one hand, you're like, you could just be making an excuse for your bullshit. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Or you might be onto something, which is that we're overcorrecting as a generation, like that
yeah,
millennial parents. Because I saw something like, I think it was like 3 times more. And
yeah.
I'm like, maybe it just needs to be twice as much more, maybe not 3 times.
Well, and I think too, like I notice kids are way too entertained right now. Like, man, talk about middle aged. Kids these days, they're too entertained.
Right.
But like, dude, I remember getting home from school, elementary school, and my mom being like, "Hey, go play in the backyard, and I'll come get you when dinner's ready." Or like being running around the neighborhood with kids and be like, "Hey, when the street lamps come on, you're supposed to come home." And like my dad can whistle super loud, so I'd be like a mile away, and I hear the whistle. I'm like, "Oh, time to go home." Now it feels, and I don't know if this is true of every family, but at least in mine, sometimes it feels like I have to be with the kids, I have to be entertaining, I have to be playing with them. And sometimes it's like, no, it's okay if I just send them upstairs and like go play upstairs for an hour, and like we'll let you know when you're allowed to come downstairs. And that's okay. Like, but feeling the release to not be physically present with them at all times and giving them the space to be
Right.
bored. Like being bored is a good thing. That's where creativity is developed.
Yeah.
But it's harder like in our attention span economy right now, where everything's instant. Phones are right here, video games, like people just want to constantly be entertained, myself included. Like,
Well, I was going to say, the part
yeah,
that's bizarre slash hypocritical of us is that I think we're almost experiencing the same thing, right? Where
yeah,
we're like overstimulated, we're over distracted, and both parties, these little humans, are kind of looking at you, looking at us, saying, well, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? Like, and I kind of wonder, I mean, I think some people are trying to go off the grid with like self-sustaining, practices, but it's like, all right, cool, you got some chickens, but like that just means you like don't buy eggs anymore. Like there's like a lot more to life than like eggs,
yeah,
so it all sort of feels a little bit like forced, so I wonder where the lines are drawn between like some of the fads that just kind of look cool, and ironically the only reason we know about it is because it's on social media that you put on the grid. So it's like, are you really off the grid? Because we wouldn't know.
yeah. Man, it's what a weird world we live in. Like, we're dealing with a whole new set of problems that I would assume there's like some problems that exist from generation to generation,
Right.
but like
It's timeless.
the smartphone, world we live in is like this whole new world of problems to navigate for adolescents that in social media, like, I don't know. I look back and like, it's weird. The iPhone came out my senior year of high school. So like the weird thing about millennials is like, we remember what it was like before the digital age, right? We remember riding around the neighborhood on our bikes and being outside and calling a friend's home phone number and their parent answering and you having to be like, this is Hayden, I'm calling for Anthony, is he home? Like all of that stuff that like,
Totally.
uh, I don't know, I'm super nostalgic. I think the 90s was like the golden age because it
Yeah.
was like there was enough technology that like we could perform well as a society, but still analog enough that like I would go to friends' house and we would sit in the living room and look each other in the eye and talk and play games. And now, like I have a sibling who's way, way younger than me and like probably two generations behind me. And her friends are literally, they just like are this the whole time. Like they never look up from their phone. And I'm like, guys, what are we doing here? It's just interesting.
Yeah. It's a moment. Like we're in a moment in time where I think I hate to say it, but like we might be like the last of the Mohicans or something,
A little bit.
like we
Yeah,
might
for
be the
sure.
last.
100%.
Because you go out another 20 years when we're in our 50s and you'll just have like grown adults that are adulting that never knew it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder if there will be a bit of a revolt. Like I have some theories or predictions around like this is more like around marketing or how to approach, you know, building a brand and building a client base. I don't know that it reaches into like the home. I'm also just not qualified to predict that. But I'd be curious your take because we've made a shift over the past. I mean, it's pretty fresh, like 90 days, and
Okay.
the first couple like attempts of communicating it, I don't know that it was clicking, but I just felt like kind of really solid on this and was like, I'm going to be like just like really consistent and bang this drum. And I've gotten the team to. I mean, they're quick studies; they get with it, But we had just a really changeful year, so I think they were a little like change fatigued. But I kind
Mm-hmm.
of just like squeezed one more change in, before the end of the year, and I thought there was going to be mutiny. But it was around really saying, hey, everything we do, like everything, we're going to build with community at the center and it be like an online community. So we're using the school platform across like multiple communities to cultivate conversation and engagement and, really just kind of like exist online in a
Mm-hmm.
way that we did before, but it was like fragmented. It wasn't like in one place. It was like, oh, well, we would do this and we would do that. And it's like, well, what if we pulled that together? Plus, we didn't have to build the tech for it. So, like, well, this is sweet. And I kind of sense that there's going to be a bit of a like niching down of communities to where people are like, hey, I really only do want to hang out with guys that do jujitsu in their 30s, like
Dude, yeah. It's funny you say that. So, like many moons ago, I was in the CrossFit world and I was a CrossFit coach. And
yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Tell me, because
yeah,
I normally mention that sooner. I mean, we've been 20 minutes. I try to tell that first before I even say my name. So
what's the number? It's like the anti-fight club. Like the first rule of CrossFit is all you talk about is how you beat CrossFit.
CrossFit, yeah,
Now I think that's evolved into like jujitsu. Like those who
right,
do it can't shut up about it.
yeah,
But like in both of those communities, like my brother was even in town this week, and I took him with me to a class, and he's like, "So do you like do it for a good workout or like?" And I was like, "I mean, it is for sure a good workout. Like I'm just wasted at the end of a class, and I'm always sore, but I'm like, that's not really why I do it." And I was like, so I was thinking about, it, I was like, do I do it for the sport of it? I'm like, yeah, I definitely enjoy like competition and just grappling. Like there's something very primal about that. I was like, honestly though, man, a lot of it's the community. Like a lot of my like close buddies go there now, and like we hang out outside of jujitsu, and like it's starting to get cold in Texas, and I do the morning classes. So you wake up at 5:30, and I'm like, damn, I'm cold, I'm stiff, I didn't sleep good. Like, I don't really want to go, but dang it, I told Dean I would show up this morning, so like I gotta go. And like it's that
Completely.
communal aspect that pulls you back. It's the same thing that attracted me to CrossFit all those years ago. Is like I've always loved strength and conditioning, but like something about lifting weights with another group of 10 people right next to you, it's like keeps you coming back on the days you don't want to.
Totally. Oh man, I have so much thought around that and experience. Like that is very much the wrestler mentality.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because you grappled all through high school and college, right?
Right. Yeah. It was interesting. I wrestled in sixth and seventh grade
Okay.
and did pretty well, like was solid, but it wasn't like a passion yet. But football was my jam. And then my eighth grade year, I played basketball, which is kind of crazy considering I went on to wrestle Division One. And then I go out for football my freshman year, and the wrestling coach was like, "Hey, you got to come out for wrestling." And I'm like, "Nah, I've done it. Like, I'm good." And he's
Yeah.
like, "No, I really think you should." And I did. And I wrestled off a senior. So I ended up starting as a freshman. Um, and then my sophomore year, I got third at states, and I just sort of fell in love with it. And I stopped growing too. It was weird. I was like big in eighth grade. I was like 5'9" and like 140 or something. Well, I graduated high school at 5'11" and 160. So like I never really grew through high school.
Yeah.
I uh, just didn't grow into what I thought maybe I would have to be a real deal football player.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I stopped doing all the other sports and really focused on wrestling. But one of the aspects of wrestling that I think is kind of akin to what you were saying there around the community is the weight cutting, like the mental toughness that came with
Yeah.
weight cutting.
Yep.
Oh man, that was just such a brutal thing. And you would build this like mutual respect and this mutual
Yes.
bond that was just like you could look each other in the eye and be
Yeah.
like,
Isn't it funny how like nothing forges community tighter or deeper than suffering. you know, like they say, misery loves company. Like that's a very true saying.
that's a good way to put
Being
it.
cast into the furnace with your peers, like really can knit you together in some unique ways.
That's great. It's biblical too, right? I mean, there's just we were taught through the gospel suffering that is really like kind of the deal. Like it's kind of the invitation. Like you're pretty much like the human condition is one of suffering and one of pain. And I think that we have tried to eliminate that. And we've done like a decent job, right? I mean, look at the big pharmaceutical companies, look at how convenient everything is, and Amazon can drop it off at your door and you can have it even
Yeah.
delivered if you're hungry. You don't even have to go to drive-throughs anymore. I mean, to think that like the convenience has gotten to the point where like you might have to walk from your couch to the door. Is that okay, or should I come in and drop it off on your lap? You lazy piece of like,
Don't even get me started on, man. I don't know. I'm like in some weird like psychotic ways, like a glutton for punishment. Like,
yeah, me too.
and I think
100%.
again, that's probably one of the things that drew me to CrossFit. Like there's you got to have a little screw loose to
Right.
be
Yeah,
in.
you gotta be a little off.
Yeah, it's like, hey, the more something hurt, the more I loved it. And like, again, generationally, like putting myself, thinking of, my responsibility to my boys primarily, I guess my daughter too, but like
Right.
specifically, I think about my boys. I'm like, I want them to do hard things. Like I don't want to deprive them of the opportunity to be forged in the fire.
Hmm.
So like, there's times where like my 4-year-old, God bless him, nice kid, zero like occupation. He probably needs occupational therapy. Like can't put his own britches on by himself, can't put his socks on. Like, his fine motor skills are developing. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And so like he's trying to put his britches on, and my wife's like, "Here, let me help you." And I'm like, "No, make him do it himself. Like make him struggle for 5 minutes. Like struggling is good, and like there's within reason. Okay, he's 4,
Yeah.
but like little micro things like that like add up over time if you develop an inner spirit of like hard things are good. I'm not afraid of hard things. I lean into that. I learn from it, and daily being okay to fail. Like I think that's a really important thing.
That's good. Hayden, where do you think that came from for you? Like, when did you pick that up? Is
Man.
that nature, nurture? You watched a clip from Hako, and like, has that always been a thing, or is it newer for you?
I do think that I think God wires different people different ways. I think for whatever reason, maybe not uniquely so, but I think I am more predispositioned to embrace the suck, so to
Yeah.
speak. I mean, certainly, like, I have a great relationship with my father, and
Okay.
I think he was really good about putting me in spaces where I had opportunities to hate what I was doing. Like, I mean, I grew up on 3 or 4 acres, and guess whose job it was to mow the yard every
Right.
Saturday, like, for
Right.
4 or 5 hours when it's 108 degrees in Texas, like, you know? So
Right.
it's things like that. Like, he didn't shy away from putting me in positions to, like, work hard, learn to be adaptable. And he never was just like putting me on an island and like set me up for failure, but kind of coached me through a lot of that. And
That's great.
yeah, so I think pulling some cues from my pops and, maybe just some unique wirings that God kind of gifted me with.
Yeah. And siblings, do you have brothers, sisters?
Yeah. So, our family dynamic is kind of interesting. So parents had me and then wanted to have more kids and it just like wasn't happening. And so about 8 years later, we adopted my brother. Like I was in the hospital room when he was born. And it was the two of us for another 6 or 7 years. And then surprise, surprise, I'm going into my freshman year of high school, I think, or maybe eighth grade. And a little bundle of joy, my sister comes along. So, here I am
Biologically or another adoption?
logically just,
That's crazy.
yeah, just wild. So, I am 35. My sister's a junior in college. So, yeah, we're
Let's go.
multi-generational family. It's fun.
I can relate to that as far as the span. The difference is,
Because it's yours are similar, right?
yeah, true. Like my family of creation, I'm the fourth of 9 children
Yeah, so you
if,
get it.
of origin, right? So I have a brother that's 43 and a brother that's 22, and my sister 2 days ago had her fifth child, which is the 23rd grandchild.
That's a lot of kids, man.
It's a lot of kids.
Yeah,
So
so
that's really interesting because probably each of you had a little bit of an only child experience at different seasons, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there was, I moved out of the house to go to college the year that my sister went to kindergarten. So like, we really didn't grow up together.
Right.
So like, I had obviously, I really was an only kid, but like, as I'm going through high school and playing football, like, I had most of my parents' attention, right? Like,
Right.
I'm not splitting time with a sibling. And then my brother gets his whole high school experience and everything to himself. So like, he was a big basketball player. And then my sister truly was an only child because me and my brother had moved out. So yeah, we all had, and even on top of that, like where my parents were at in their journey, like when they had me, they were 24, broke,
Right.
living in Houston. And then when they had my sisters, like my dad had at that point kind of made it. And
Right.
so we tease them. We're like, dude, like when Hallie went on her spring breaks, y'all are going to like the Bahamas. Like my spring break was we went to like Navasota,
Right. Right. Right.
camping or whatever.
That's
We
funny.
tease
So
them
you had like very different experiences because
a little bit.
they had to come up before you
A
were
little bit,
gone.
yeah. Randy
But
made
that
it.
probably instilled a certain level of um, you know, appreciation for hard work, and because you watched your dad convert from
For sure.
one socioeconomic level to another, and I'm sure you saw the work that took.
Yeah, and it's so much of what I know about my dad now, I have learned after the fact. So like
Right.
now, you do that thing where like you get out of college and all of a sudden your parents aren't really your parents, they're more of your peers and your friends.
Right.
And you start learning the stories that you never knew about. So like, I'm learning all these stories about like my dad starts a business and grows this business and then wild stuff starts happening. He sells the business and just like all of this is happening in the midst of the 2007 financial crisis. And here I am, like junior in high school. I don't know any of this is going on. And so now as a 35-year-old, we talk about that a lot. I'm like, the respect level just goes through the roof because I'm like, you're handling all of that and then coming home and your 3 kids have no idea because you put the smile on your face
Right.
and you handle it. And you got this newborn baby and you got a sophomore in high school and like just this probably internal stresses he felt I'm like, dude, how did you do that? And still coach my baseball team. Like, what in
Right.
the
And
world?
show
You know?
up. Yeah. It's amazing. You've probably seen the reels. I feel like every Christmas they go around recently, and I get a kick out of them. Where I think it started with like a stack of sticky notes,
Uh-huh.
where it's sort of like, what do I get for Christmas, or what do I, you know, what are you going to give me, or whatever, and then like pretty much like places it on like the light switch and the food, and it's like, yeah, I'm providing you this house and this
Room and
television,
board.
and
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So I can so relate to that, and I struggle because I grew up in a really unique way, far below the poverty line,
Hmm.
and I just had like a really challenging upbringing. Maybe I'll be on your podcast and go into it deeper.
Yeah.
Will put me in the hot seat, but I so a lot of my drive and a lot of my toughness, mental toughness, I should say, I didn't like have a choice. It was like kind of
Have to.
it was survival, like 100%. So I'm always fascinated by people that have that drive that did it. Like I have almost a higher, I do. I have a higher respect for people that come from stable homes, that
Sure.
had healthy relationships, that are
Yeah.
still driven in that way. Because I'm like, where do you find that? Because for me, there was a grizzly bear chasing me, and I had to run from it. I am really fascinated by like the trying to peg. Is it like you want to honor your father? Is it a
Yeah.
pressure to like, I manned up, you better man up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure some people feel that way. Like, it's specifically for me, like it hits a little closer. So my dad and I work for the same company.
Oh, right on.
So he started a PEO, ran it for 10 years, sold it to the company I work for now. And I think the original intent was, hey, Randy, stick around for a year, help us transition clients. 20 years have gone by and he's still here. But,
Right.
I'm a CrossFit coach. I get married. And within about 2 weeks of getting married, I'm like, I probably need to get a big boy job.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I took like a first job I could get, was like a software company. Like I was in their contracts department. I hated every second of it. It was like, I got to get something on the resume.
Yeah.
So I did it for about a year and a half. And one day I'm going to downtown Dallas every day, like fighting traffic out, going to the high rise. And I'm walking out of my office one day and I'm calling my dad. I'm like, dude, I hate this. Like I'm 24 years old. I can't do this for another 40 years. And he's
Right,
like,
right.
well, dude, we got a Dallas office. Why don't you call the guy that runs that branch? So I did. And 2 weeks later, I was working at the company I do now. I had no idea what we did, had never sold anything in my life.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure the conversation behind the scenes, like they typically only hire people with like deep industry experience.
Right.
And I was the antithesis of that.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure the conversation at the executive table was like, that's Randy's kid. We'll give him a shot.
Yeah.
That fact was not lost on me. So like I wore that very heavily for about 3 years of like, I cannot make my dad look like a dummy here. Like I have to prove my worth independent of my relationship to my father. And so, was that healthy pressure? I don't know.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether it was healthy or not, like I felt it.
Here you are 8 years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
So,
you've risen through the ranks and you're leading a team.
yeah. Yeah. January 1st, actually, I'll move into a new role where I have a couple of teams that I build out. So kind of a new endeavor for me, but, yeah, super glad to be here. Like
Yeah, that's
it's
awesome.
been a good journey, man.
That's fascinating. So what a cool thing, because I've got kind of my own set of daddy issues. Um,
The way
and
everybody does.
yeah, right. It's just
You
like,
have the best dad, like, no dad's perfect.
right. And then, like pick your poison. Do you want the pressure of doing the opposite, or trying to do the same? Like they did it so well that you're trying to live up to it.
Yeah.
I think it's probably pretty rough either way. For me, my father and I are different, at least in all the externals.
Okay.
I think there's probably more similarity there than I realized, but I chose a very different path. So he's very much like an outdoorsman, and they hunt, and he's a captain, and just very like of the elements.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely started that way, like my first 10 years of life, because that was just following suit.
That's it. Yeah.
But then I started to learn, like, wait a second, wait a tick. Like, if I stay on this path, I'll probably be working in the trades. I'll probably, be maybe struggling. And I just chose a different path, which was education,
Mm-hmm.
athletics. And then, it was kind of like, oh, well, you guys are all going hunting this weekend. I have a wrestling tournament, or I have homework I need to do. And then just sort of this deviation where I set my life up in a way that was just different. So a lot of the bond that my father has with of the 9 children, that's 6 boys and 3 girls, with my other 5 brothers is really based around like commonality of work,
Mm-hmm.
um, the like hobby aspect of hunting. So I'm like the odd man out, I'm like the one with the, yeah.
Interesting. Are you like close with your dad, would you say?
I don't think he'll listen to this. So yeah, it's a hard. I used to think I was, and
Yeah.
then my wife probably schooled me up on it. But um, I've never had much conflict, so I thought we were close because there was no conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But then I learned, oh wait, there's no conflict because we're not close, right? You really
Nothing to fight about because we don't
nothing to
interact.
fight about
Right?
because there's nothing that we're grappling with.
Yeah.
So the honest answer is no. It's much more of like a friendship
Yeah.
scenario, not in like a graduated to friendship, but more like always that way.
Yeah.
So that's for another day. But I think the father son relationship is uh, is one for the ages, right? I mean, it's as old
Yeah.
as time.
Yeah. I mean, dude, you said you have at least one son, right?
So I have 3,
Okay.
and it's Gavin is my stepson, so that changes. That's a different dynamic altogether.
Right.
And then I have 2 daughters, and then I have 2 sons, and I'm really thankful that my sons were last. I've just felt like it gave me like a little bit more runway to get it together. Not that I like totally am screwing it up with my daughters, but it's just like
The
different,
daughters take some of the rough edges off, don't they?
Yeah,
They soften you up a little bit. Mine does.
100%, man. And I'm naturally pretty tough. Like I'm not as I appear, and that's kind of like I've always been kind of like a pretty boy from the standpoint of like I like product in my hair and I buy this knit sweater, like and I decorate my office like this. But really, I'm like a cold-hearted killer at the same time. So
Yeah.
it's like I struggle with that because I want my boys to be tough, you know what I mean? And then I have to somehow manage the fact, and my wife is like, they don't have to be that way. They're 6 and 2. And I'm like,
Yeah.
they should own a business by now. Like I'm struggling with that, like real time.
Same, man. It's a constant conversation piece of, I feel the same way, man. I'm like, I want my boys to be okay with hard things, to be tough, to be resilient, to be adaptable. I also want them to be tender. I want them to be
Right.
kind. I want them to be gentle. How do you develop both of those? I want those things for myself, and it's my probably natural disposition. It sounds like is very similar to yours, where I'm like toughness first, and
Yeah.
we'll figure the tender stuff out later.
Right.
And man, my wife is so good to just like put the hand on my shoulder and be like, "Hey, they're 4, like ease up a bit." And I don't always do the best job of listening to her in those moments. I'm like, yeah, but you gotta learn now, and
Why are our wives like always right? Like that is crazy. I hate that.
she's gonna hear you.
They're always right. And it's not even what I've
No,
learned is that they're not right in the short term. It's not like "Hey, you were
yeah,
supposed to turn there." They're always right over like a pretty long arc. Like, and I don't tell them, but it'll be like 36 months. And I'm like, shit.
yeah. You know what it is for me is we have those conversations. You were in the car. I'm arguing with the kid on the way to church, and then it's that night where we put the kids to bed, and I reflect back, and I'm like, I could have been better in that moment. And then I'm like, Do I acknowledge it and apologize, or do I just slide it under the rug? And the more times that I am quick to just like own where I could have been better, I've never regretted that afterwards. So trying
Yeah.
to be better about that in the moment rather than wait 12 hours. It's like, how do I now have the self-awareness to take a step back and realize when I'm being too harsh in the moment and catch myself before I have to go clean it up later. I
Yeah.
think that's the next evolution of my learning.
That's good, man. I really like that. It reminds me of working out because I've heard and always said to myself, and you know it from being an athlete, like if I were to number the amount of workouts that I've done between practice and CrossFit and the gym and just like everything, I mean, it's like a few thousands at this point.
It's a
You know what I mean? Like
lifetime.
I've done it however many days lived, I've worked out, I don't know, half of them, you know what I mean? Like a lot of them. And not once, ever, for any reason ever, have I regretted working out. I've never been like, I shouldn't have done that.
100%. And yet, there still is that thing in your brain every time you're about to, like, do I really need to? Should I take the day off? Should I have that one extra cookie? Should I sleep in? Like, there's always that other man trying to convince you not to do the thing that you should do and that you're going to be glad you did, but he's still trying to talk you out of it anyway. And like that voice gets smaller the more you tell him to shut up, but like he still is always there in some capacity.
Yeah, I have this thing that drives me, and I've run it by a few other people, and they've been like, "Yeah, that checks out." And then I had a really cool experience where somebody who I had shared it with years ago and forgot that I had. I went out to an event from a previous company that I worked at that's now a partner of ours, and he got recognized. He's still like full time with this company, and I hadn't seen him in a few years. And I was like, dude, congratulations, man. He's like, bro, I'm so glad you're here. He's like, you told me this thing. And I was like, I told you that. It reminded me kind of like in Talladega Nights, where he's like, if you're not first, you're last, you know?
Yeah.
And what it is that I, I have to win 4 of the 7 days of the week. Like you can lose 3 games in the World Series or the NBA Finals or the Stanley Cup, and you're still a champion with 4. So I have
Yeah.
like a really strong discipline around getting 4 workouts in. I should do 5, 6, 7, but like I just will do something. And then, in the other areas of my life too, I try to win, 4 days of the week. But I think we beat ourselves up because like not every day we kill it, and it's like just let that day be an L, dude. Take the L and go win tomorrow. Can you like relate? How does that sound to you? Or you like psycho and you work out 8 days a week? Or
So, I go through seasons, right? Like
right,
I would, it sounds like we're very similar people. Like I love what you just said about the 4 days a week thing. I think I'm having to, in my middle aged, I'm having to accept my life now looks different than it did when I was 22. Like when I was 22 and I was a CrossFit coach, you know what my daily schedule was? Sleep until 9, go lift for 3 or 4 hours, coach 2 or 3 classes in the evening, go play video games. Like I had no other responsibilities. Now it's like, well, I have, my kids' basketball practice that I coach. I have my kids' jujitsu that I coach. I, have to take them to school. I have a wife that I want to spend time with. I have a house that the grass has got to get mowed and the,
right.
light bulb just went out. So I got to replace, like, I got a job. I'm about to have employees that, I have to help. So there's all these other things stealing my time. So I think where I start to feel that pressure is like, oh, well, I used to work out for an hour and a half a day or an hour a day. And now, man, maybe I can get like a 20-minute workout in. And like, I just have to be okay with that. Like, that's good for the day. Like, I won the day because 20 minutes is better than 0 minutes.
It's good. Yeah, that is. I think there's a lot of value in like. There's a lot of. It's a lot of like. I'm trying to think how to frame this. Like, this is a challenging topic because there's like putting your own oxygen mask on, and what that does require. But as a parent, you will feel selfish. I know I do
Yep.
for doing something that is like very healthy and
Yes.
wise, like working out. So that's a
Yeah.
really hard thing to grapple with, I think,
It
because
is.
it's like you have to be selfish a little bit to be selfless. You have to put your oxygen mask on, and like where are those lines drawn? And I think you answered it actually, which is
Yeah.
that it's not don't work out. It's just don't go for 2 hours. Like work
There's a
out
health.
for 47 minutes and get the hell out of there.
Exactly. Yeah, man. I heard it said one time, you can't give what you don't have, and it's kind of the oxygen mask thing. It's like, to a certain extent, I am the best father, the best husband when I have also taken care of myself. Now that can, within reason, right? Like you
Yeah.
can take that to an extreme that's not healthy for your family, but I'm a better dad when I'm a healthy dad. I'm a better dad when I live longer. When I, I mean, everybody who works out knows like the endorphins and the
Right.
way you conduct your day and just who you are as a person like changes when you take care of yourself. And so I want to be that best version of myself for my family. Now, sometimes there can be selfish motivations there.
Right.
And that's when it can start to creep into like, hey, do I need the hour and 15-minute workout 7 days a week? No, that's probably not super healthy. Like there's some
No.
selfishness there, but releasing yourself from the I feel bad because I'm going to work out, I think is a healthy thing. And, fortunately, my boys are just now getting old enough where I'm like, hey, I'm going to go work out for 30 minutes. You are too. Come on, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
whether you want to or not, get off the couch. You're coming to lift with me.
Do you do it?
And
Do you like home gym it? Do you have like a
dude, I
nice?
have a sweet home gym. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
awesome.
that's one of the things that was always really important to me is like I never want to have the excuse of like I didn't have time to go to the gym today. Like
Right.
my gym is 15 steps that way. Like that excuse doesn't exist,
And do you
So
work from home?
most days, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, like I have no excuses.
Right.
And
But you've eliminated them, so it's funny how we do this, right? I think successful people, well, I know that successful people do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do. And I
yeah,
think that you get to a place where you've constructed your life. I
hmm
was thinking about this as you were sharing, like it might be worth exploring. I feel like you and I have a lot of alignment. So I think you'll concur. But it's like up to this point, maybe 35 is the number, maybe it's 40, maybe we're a little ahead of our time. But I think that you're in this like construction mode, right? Where you're building the thing, you're building the family, you're building the mindset, you're building the just like infrastructure of your life. And then you go from construction to like capacity or probably put better stewardship, right? It's like, how do I steward all
yeah,
of this and maintain it and sustain it? Not just like from a managerial standpoint, because you want it to grow, and develop. But
yeah,
I
yeah.
think like if I meet a guy in their 30s, like mid 30s, and they're like ripped, I'm like, that's not right. Yeah, I'm like, you're not spending time with your kids or you're not eating pizza with them. Or like, what are you doing?
Diet is on point, bro. Like,
Yeah, like you're killing it in this
yeah,
one area of your life. Like I would rather be a little bit, I have a one rule of thumb and it keeps me regulated. Then I'll go like, go on keto for a couple of weeks. I'm right where I need to, the holidays and all that. But I just am absolutely committed that in my life that my chest goes out further than my stomach.
yeah. Like stick out for yeah.
And
Then
there's
you're
a couple ways you can do that. If it's creeping, just go do some bench, you get your
more
chest
bench or
bigger.
less calories. That's typically your two options.
Right, right. It's just like,
Yeah.
business, money in, money out. So as you were sharing there, like kind of running through a little bit of the like gamut of marriage and family and business and career and, faith and health, it kind of made me think about, almost like categorizing each of those areas as assets,
Yeah.
and I think for people that are business minded, this will make sense because we'll have to talk about this more, offline, but we've launched something recently called the MyCore Academy,
Okay.
and it's built on a formula that I've lived my life on, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I think it'll resonate with you. It's mindset plus skill set plus tool set equals asset.
Yeah.
So it's this
Yeah.
cool breakdown, right? And I think CrossFit's kind of a good example where it's like you definitely have to have a mentality. You're going to have to learn double unders eventually, dude. They're really hard, and bar muscle ups, and like they suck. But also you have to have like the right jump rope and the right rig and the right grips, and the tool set does matter. And then you can equate all that into an asset. So I think approaching each of those areas of your life help
Mhm.
too, because that is an aggregate of an asset. And you don't have to do any of these things. Like I have plenty of peers that are still single,
Mhm.
no kids, in their 30s, and no one's judging them. I'm judging them, but nobody else is judging them for it, because I'm like, bro, you have not had a sleepless night with a sick kid or a blowout diaper and then had to go lead a team. Like, we're not the same, bro. Like, we're not built the same.
Well, I tease my brother. So, my brother's 8 years
Right.
younger than me. So he's what, 26, and he just got married a couple months ago. And they watched our kids. So my wife and I were celebrating something one weekend. So we got
Cool.
them to
For their
watch our
10
kids.
year.
Not even all three of our kids. They watched two of our kids. And at the end of the week, I think they watched them for like a day and a half or maybe 2 days. And they're like, man, we are so tired. And I'm like, bro, like you got 2/3 of the package for like 48 hours. Like multiply that by years. And now you know why like I went from looking like I was 25 to 45 in like a 6 month span,
Dude, it's real. I anytime I meet people without kids, I'm like, you merely adopted the darkness. I was born to it, molded by it. Like
Yeah.
you don't know until you have young children.
And isn't it, I mean, we were guilty of that too, though, right? Like I remember in college, I don't even think I was taking a full workload. I was probably taking like 12 hours and be like,
Right.
I'm so busy. I have like 3 hours of stuff to do today. And then when I was like a young professional before I was married, like, oh man, I remember in college, I thought I was so busy. And then you get married and you're like, well, when I was a young professional, and it's always that next season of life where it's like you think you're so busy, and then 2 years later you look back on your former self and you're
Right.
like, that guy was an idiot. Like he didn't know anything about anything. And I'm sure my 40-year-old self is going to look on my 35-year-old
So
self.
I'm so glad you said that, because as you were sharing it, I was thinking the same thing, and I've done that same exercise
Yep.
because every level has its devil.
Yes.
At the same time, I think, because I've been talking to some people that are older, and they're like, dude, there's nothing worse than the 30s. Like your
I've heard that too.
30s. Have you heard this?
Okay, well, Tom Hanks was talking about it. Did you see that
Right.
thing?
Yeah, yeah. That's where I
Like
saw
the
it too.
30s was my worst. I'm like, okay, that makes me feel better because yeah, dude, we're dude, I'm tired.
And even like down to the basics of like, man, can you imagine where we are pretty sure no one's gonna die if we don't check on him for like 10 minutes, right? Because Levi at 2, he's just still like, we have to be on it, hawk all the time. He could go wander out and get eaten by an alligator, whereas Judah is 6 and you could leave him for 30 minutes and just sort of check in. We just haven't hit that stage. And I'm like, dude, this is going to be a cakewalk in like 3 years from now.
See, I know. I think the same thing. I'm like, oh, you do that thing where you're like, when we get out of diapers, then you get out of diapers, like, well, when my kids can get their own snack and turn
Move
the
the
TV on.
goalpost. Move the
When
goalpost.
you're always moving it, but like the problems just change. And I'm taking some of this from like friends who are a season ahead in life, and you could probably validate this. But I'm like, well, my daughter, like, yeah, it's hard now because she can't put her clothes on by herself. But like when she's 13, she's gonna be a hormonal teenage girl. Like it's a whole other set of problems. So like, I think the goalpost just shifts, and then I think, yeah, when you're like 55 and your kids move out, then it's like quiet again. But then all you're doing when you're that old is like, man, I miss when the kids
I was
were
just going to
here.
say that we're not factoring in the nostalgia and the aging and the depression that comes with getting older. So you're like, yeah, that's going to be nice, but yeah, you're not going to be 35
Exactly.
and experiencing that. You're going to be 55 or 45. So it's like the whole thing's a crapshoot, but you
Yeah.
just pick your poison and endure.
Yeah. I mean, my wife's parents, God bless them, they live 10 minutes from us. And sometimes they'll just call us and be like, hey, do you want us to take the kids tonight? And we're like, are you sure? Like, do you want them?
Yeah.
Take them. They're yours. We'll
Yeah.
see you in 48 hours. It's like they want that energy in their house. And so it is a good like reminder of like, hey, yeah, it was a hard day. My kids are whiny and they just spilled juice on the carpet for the 20th time. And
Right.
I have 4, soccer games in 100-degree heat this weekend, but like there will come a day where I'm like, man, I hope I'm not always looking forward to the next season of life, that I can just like be present where we're at, be thankful for the season we're in, even with all the hardships of it, and just like not trying to rush to the next thing, I think is something I'm becoming more aware of.
I think there's, as you were sharing that, I thought of those moments cutting weight when I would look at my teammate and we just sort of be like, I see you, man. You're a unique you. We're in the middle of a tough CrossFit workout. You just catch eyes. I think
Yeah.
those moments with our wives
Oh
are
yeah.
special. You look at each other like, we're badasses, right? It's like, this is brutal, dude.
There's so many times where like, if you could just be a fly on the wall of our house, man, where like juice is spilled and somebody just knocked their brother's this over and people are fighting and we just look at each other, we're like, are you seeing this right now? Like, what is going on? And then we just like laugh about it at the end of the night. It's like, man, that's the sweet spot of life, you know?
Yeah. It's good, man. It's finding like the eye of the storm, right? Because there's a calm in that moment when you sort of go like, is happening, like look at this. And then I think the literal eye of the storm you're in at that point, where you just sort of take a beat and go, it's like kind of chill right now.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, it's just because we took a break from the swirling and we're just like zooming out, watching it, going like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, is there nail polish everywhere? Like, it's
That
really
permanent
odd.
marker you used on the couch, buddy. Oh, that's the best idea. Yeah.
So I know we kind of went down that path, which was awesome. I was curious your I didn't want to just breeze over it. Your kind of response to the idea that like each of these areas of your life are assets that have to be stewarded, ourselves included. You just seem like a guy that does a pretty damn good job of stewarding your assets.
Man, I definitely appreciate that. I would like to think I am, but man, you probably are similar in this respect. But like, I constantly feel a mixture of imposter syndrome and like failure. Like even in the wins, it's like, yeah, but I could be doing this with my sons. I could be doing this at work. I should be doing that with my wife. Like, there's definitely always a feeling of deficiency there for sure. Some of which is warranted for sure, but a lot of
Right.
which is,
Some of it's like, I really did drop the ball on that. But
yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
But
Yeah.
I totally can relate to that.
Yeah. It's yeah, man. It's just life as a 35-year-old trying to figure all the things out and what I would maybe call the messy middle of life, where there's just a lot of things pulling your attention, pulling your time, pulling your thought capacity, and trying to figure out how much of myself do I give to each one of these things.
Right. It's hard to find that balance. And then there's also things that maybe just are natural. Like, of all the things, what would you say? And you might not like the answer. I don't think I like my answer. But what would you say is like the thing that you're best at, like comes natural to you? This is a safe space to humble
Yeah, I
brag,
mean,
by the way. Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, probably work.
Right. Same.
Yeah, like it wasn't always this way, but for the past probably 7 years, I've been doing this for 9. January will be the start of my 10th year.
Cool.
For the past 7 years, I've just been really fortunate to, like, I've had a lot of success with work, and I've developed a lot of cachet with folks in my company, a lot of, relational equity.
Right.
And so a lot of times, like, it's easy for me to start finding my identity in my work because it is something I have been gifted at and have seen success with. And, you get the people chirping in your ear of like, oh, you're so great at this or whatever. And then you step into like a different arena. Maybe it's fatherhood or with your spouse. You're like, well, I'm not as successful and I'm not receiving the accolades there. So work kind of becomes the safe space and the place where you start to feel your identity rooted in. And so, yeah, I don't necessarily like my answer, but I do think that's probably what comes most naturally to me.
Yeah. Man, you and I do have a lot in common. Yeah, that's for me too. I mean, I kind of created my world being a founder, and an entrepreneur. So it's particularly personal to me because I kind of forged it out of nothing, grabbed a machete and I mean, even down to where as people kind of get through the layers of what my core is and why it is and who it is, there's like these like, no freaking way. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty dope, right? Like they'll kind of connect the dots and see the tapestry and go like, whoa, this is really neat. And so I like double struggle because I have my identity so wrapped in it, and I have not even
Yeah.
apologized for it. It's one of our core values. I'm actually writing a book right now called Lead with Who, which is we have three core values: walk by faith, lead with who, and measure what matters. And it's
Okay.
been this like philosophy that I've lived by kind of unintentionally, and then figured out how to like put some illustration and framework and
Yeah.
language to it. So I like pride myself in the fact that it's an extension of who I am, and
Yeah.
I'm my DNA is in it and my fingerprint is on it, and not just for me, but like the collective of it
Yeah.
all.
Right.
So it's really hard to draw those lines, right? And be like,
It's,
wait, that's my career. That's an asset that that fuels these things, and I'm okay. It's okay for me to like own it, but how do you like distinguish it and then set it over there and maybe take a break for a moment? I struggle with that because the lines bleed a lot.
dude, 100%. It's funny we're talking about this, man. Like this fortuitous timing. Literally 2 days ago, I wrote this little sticky note. I don't know if you can read it, but it says PEO is what you do, not who you are. And like, I had to write that to myself, dude, because man, I just get so caught up in like, where am I at on the leaderboard? How do my peers view me? How do my bosses view me? How am I advancing in my career? And like,
Wow.
man, there's times where, not even there's times, I would say most nights, I'm sitting at a dinner table and I'm there physically, but mentally I'm 1,000 miles away. And my wife will go, hey, hey, hey. And I'm just like, what? Yeah, I didn't hear anything that just happened the past 10 minutes. It's like, oh, I hate that about myself. I hate that. I don't want to be that dad, but
And you know
your
what
mind
sucks, Hayden? I bet you're so sharp. I mean, I can tell just from hanging out with you that you can thin slice. You know how on a live picture, you take a picture and then it's like, weird, how did it capture the moment before?
yeah,
And the moment after, right? Well, it's sort of the way our brain works, where like if you don't think you heard what somebody said and you say like, hey, what was that? And then your brain like recalls it and says, this is what they said. So in a
yeah.
weird way, you're not present, but you can keep the conversation going, and not just in like, oh, that's awesome,
You're a
babe, no
zombie.
way. You're a
Yeah,
freaking
you're,
zombie. And
you're on
then
autopilot, kind of.
you catch the last thing and you're like, oh, really? Tell me more about what your mom said. And you're like, dude, I could
Dude,
not
that's
pass a
one
quiz on
thousand
this.
percent me. You just described it perfectly. Where it's like I'm keeping enough involved in the conversation where they haven't quite caught on yet, but they know something is. They know
A
she.
miss.
Here's her exact words. She'll be like, "What are you thinking about?" I'll be like, "No." She'll be like, "You're not listening to me.
Yeah.
What are you actually thinking about?" I can tell. I'm like, oh, dang it, you know me too well.
You're like, damn, why you see me like that?
Yeah, she knows me. Dang it.
Yeah,
10 years
that's
of
why, like,
research.
as you were saying it, I was like, I bet you're like me, where that's an inner dialogue of a shake off and I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention, but I don't actually say that because I'm like, this is like, there's like a hole punch or like a punch card, and I don't want to like put another punch in a time where I wasn't present. So if I could like avoid the free bagel after 10 punches, like I'm going to try to get away with it, but they always know. They like, you're not present.
No, marriage will do that to you. You get to know the other person pretty well, and you know their tells, and you know when they're lying, and you know when they're not fully present. So, I mean, thank God for my wife, because otherwise I'd probably be a pretty miserable person to be around.
Yeah. And you know what? I think the irony in that is that for high achievers, high caliber humans, as I like to call it, because what we're doing with this academy actually just made me think we're starting to spawn these higher level groups. So we have the MyCore Academy, and then I'm developing right now, we haven't launched it yet, but the MyCore Masters. And
Okay.
the idea within the Masters is like, these are people that are ready to like really pursue mastery and kind of already have in their own right. And I can sense that you're at just that level of thinking. And it's like really difficult because the irony of the fact that this person, this woman, was the only thing or is the only thing that can get you to be present and can get you to stop thinking about it, because you get lost in their beauty, you get lost in their essence, you get lost in their, femininity, and then you're sort of like, oh wait, why aren't I present in the one thing that can actually do it? It's not a movie, it's not a ball game, it's not even my children. Like, and obviously for men, if you add sex to that, then it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm here for it, but you can't just have that around the clock. And by the way, chicken or the egg, you're not present, so you're not getting sex, and you're just like, shit, like I know how this works, but I'm screwing it up in every which way.
The life of a husband, man. It's hard. Like, it's like you want to pursue excellence in everything. So for me, at least, I can convince myself that, like, my inattentiveness at home, it's like, well, that's because, like, I'm thinking about this thing at work, and I want to be, what I'll say to myself is, I want to be an excellent employee. I want to lead my team well. I want to be the type of guy that helps my business flourish.
Right.
So it's okay that, like, my brain is over here. And it's like, well, yeah, there's a time and a place for that. It's from 9 to 5 or when your kids are asleep or whatever. But, like, man, nobody's buying PEO at 6:30 at night. Like, be with your kids. Like, you get an hour and a half with them. Just, like, the mental shift for me is really hard,
That's so interesting, man. And even the reason I went off on the tangent about the masters was because I wrote the copy for the description, and I used this phrase. It said an elite growth community for high caliber humans. I was like, that's like the kind of tagline, if you will.
Yeah.
And I've been like chewing on that, thinking like, man, what a blessing and curse being a high caliber human is,
Yeah. Well, yeah, like Elon Musk, love him or hate him. Like, there's a lot of things you can appreciate about the guy. And somebody was asking him one time, like, what's it like to be Elon Musk? He's like, my mind is a storm. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I feel you, man. Like, I don't have $400 billion to my name, but, like, mine is too, dude. Like, it's the blessing. Like, it's what in some ways makes me excellent in some areas of my life. But there's some serious drawbacks to it too, that, left unchecked can cause relational harm in the household.
And then there's this element that is maybe taboo or off limits, because I mean, even the act of talking about it in this moment feels a little douchey. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like a little bit of a douchebag to be like, yeah, it's just like when I'm killing the game in this way, it's hard. And so then you're not really able to be vulnerable about being excellent. Like, it's like, oh, is it hard up there in the ivory tower? So it's really weird to even like, that's why, like, with the masters, I think there could be like a safe space for high caliber people to say, hey, I'm not going to be coming across arrogant if I talk about how I'm dope, right? And it's like, no, you're dope, I'm dope, we're just doping it up, but we need to figure out like how to not just be awesome in these 1 to 2 areas, because my brother, who can barely, rub 2 nickels together, is like an amazing father. You know what I mean? I'm like, how do you do that? And it's like, well, he doesn't work even remotely as hard as you, So it's just like this weird. I'm not even saying that about my brother specifically, but I think
your brother doesn't listen to this, man.
No. My brothers are awesome, but just saying, I think I was saying that as like an avatar, of like a person in that realm that I can envy. I do envy my brothers for they work their asses off and do just fine. But meaning, like, how did you guys figure out the fatherhood thing? Because I can't seem to crack the code on that. So it's just sort of interesting how you can't really have it all. Like it's hard.
No, I mean, that's the part of, like, it's a broken world, man. Like, the post-fall world that we live in, like, those things were a reality, and now they're not. Like, there will come a day where all things are made new, but until then, like, there's always going to be fracture in everything we do. Even the things that we're excellent at, we're not perfect at them, right? And so much more so the things that we're not excellent at, we're going to be very imperfect at those. And that's kind of the whole point of the gospel, isn't it? Like, taking our imperfections and clinging to a day that they get polished up a bit.
Yeah. Have you always then on a faith walk, is your Christianity newer? Did you grow up in it? Has it always been integrated in your work? Talk to me a little bit about how
Yeah.
you deal with that, because I am pretty bold in my faith. I even get criticized quite often. I'm sorry that I'm not sorry, but I also have to navigate living in the world but not of it.
Yeah. You know, I grew up in the church, which
Right.
means we went to church on Sundays, but it wasn't something that our lives weren't lived in such a way that everything was viewed through the lenses of honoring God
Right.
and trying to make much of Christ, right? So if you would have asked me when I was, a kid, like, are you a Christian? I'd be like, yeah, I'm a Christian.
Yeah, of course.
You'd have said, well, like, why? Like, tell me about what that looks like. I'm like, well, we go to church on Sundays and I do youth group on Wednesdays, and
Right.
I try not to cuss too much, and like
Yeah, right.
there were nowhere in that description of my faith, if you could even call that, would I have said anything about relationship with Jesus, my own brokenness, my need for saving,
Mm.
none of that. And a lot of things kind of took place over the course of my senior year where I was questioning, like, why do I believe what I say I believe? And kind of fell into. So I grew up in College Station, it's a college town, right? I mean,
Okay.
it's the whole city revolves around A&M.
Right.
So I did this thing called Young Life.
I know Young Life. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's funny is I had made fun of Young Life like all through high school. I'm like, Young Life, like, what is this
Yeah.
thing? Like, I don't get it. But my friends all went to Young Life camp and they came back different. I was like, I'm going to check this thing out my senior
Yeah.
year. So I started going, right, and all of the student leaders were college kids, so they were just a half step ahead in life, and just listening to the way they talked and they interacted and the way that they thought about Jesus, I was like, hey, something's different here. And then right as all this is kind of going on in my mind, I go to my freshman year of college, and as God would have it, my freshman year roommate was a really strong believer, and two or three other guys that I fell into step with were really strong believers, and it was the first time where I saw faith lived out. And yeah, I mean, God, the way I would kind of describe it is, it's like when you build a campfire, it always starts with a little kindling, and
Right.
then so I think as I'm growing up, there's kindling there. Like I'm in places where I'm exposed to Jesus,
Yep.
and it's hitting here, but it's not resonating down here quite yet. And then in college, it's like he lit that thing on fire, man.
Cool.
And just I can look back and see how God orchestrated a lot of that. And what if I didn't have that freshman year roommate? What if I don't show up to Young Life that one night? Like just little things like that, where it's like he was chasing after me. And so when I was probably 18, I remember making a conscious decision, like, hey, if I'm gonna Christianity is a bad hobby. Like,
Right. Kind of sucks. Yeah.
be all
If you're
in or
not
be
all
all
in.
out, right? Like having one foot in on Christianity is like, man,
Yeah.
there's better ways to spend your time and money and
And
resources.
the Bible says it, right? It's a pretty
Yeah,
hardcore, like, I will spew you out of my mouth.
yeah,
Do not be
for
lukewarm.
sure. So yeah, I just made this conscious decision of like, all right, if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it all the way. Like I'm gonna jump all in, and like have never looked back on that decision or any subsequent decision
Right.
to follow Jesus since then, and with regret.
Yeah. That's great, man. I
Yeah.
love that. As you were sharing your story, your testimony there, essentially, it made me think about your parents as the
Yeah.
ones that laid the kindling, and it's like, this might be an oversimplification, but I think you'd agree, if nothing else, like if we get that right, if we just put our children in the environment
Mm-hmm.
to know God,
For
and to
sure.
know the Lord, then it's like winning, like winning.
And what was cool about it is I can't, it probably would have been my sophomore or junior year of college. I came home for a Christmas break and was at home for an extended period of time for the first time in a while. And we're sitting around, the kitchen table one night, just me and my parents. And this is kind of as I'm shifting in from child to peer.
Yeah.
And they're just like, dude, something's different in you. Like the way you're talking to your siblings, the way you carry yourself, the way you think about things, the way everything, like it's just different, like what's kind of going on. And so we talked about that. And my parents were really in the same boat as me, where it's like they would have said they were believers. They went to church. Like
Right.
they grew up in a Christian home, and they're kind of like observing me from afar, like, hey, he looks different now than he did a year ago. Like, what is that? And so they start asking a lot of the same questions that I had asked a year or two earlier, and they kind of came to a similar fulcrum in their lives where they were just like, we're going to do this all in, and we're going to, you know, spend more time with Jesus and try to view the world with gospel lenses. And so it was a really cool like shift in our family that all kind of took place in this, you know,
That's
20.
really cool that you were used to be sort of a chapter ahead, you know, that you had a transformation and they could sense the Holy Spirit and your peace and your, you know, just sort of reconciled soul. And they were like, hey, this isn't just going through the motions. What's going on there? And you kind of led them deeper, not maybe to it, but deeper.
Yeah. I mean, we led each other in a lot of ways. Like, you know, it's been cool. So yeah,
because they knew what was up, right? They knew the truth, like they knew the deal. They just hadn't been engaged. That's really cool. I mean, my sort of personal testimony, very short version, would be that I watched my parents fully rely on God. I mean, they took that very seriously, and I mean that sort of tongue in cheek because it caused a lot of dysfunction and chaos and poverty, and it was sort of like this constant, well, why don't you guys do something about it? You know, well, the Lord will provide. And it's like, no, like he remember he provided like you that go get a job, you know, like that kind of thing. So I think I got a callus of self-reliance that kicked into gear very young. I mean, about 10 years old, I just was like, I'm going to forge my path. I'm going to pioneer my way. And that caught up to me at about 25 years old, where I had expelled just all of my personal strength, you know, and I did quite well in that time, right? That led to Division I wrestler, Ivy League student, you know, entrepreneur, married, and now have a family. Like I was kind of doing the deal pretty early, and then it all went to crap because it was all rooted in just like Nathan Bourne's shouldering. Yeah. And the last 10 years has honestly been like how it's taken me 10 years to actually even get to where I surrendered. Like it was like I just 10 years ago I broke, and then it took me 10 years, it took me 25 years to broke, and then 10 years to go like, all right, like your way, not mine. I mean, I am a stubborn, hard-headed dude, you know, like it's bad. It's bad.
Oh, yeah. That's cool.
So that's neat that you found your way at that time. I'm sure it hasn't just been up and to the right since then, but that you've always had that hardwired.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the thing about Christianity is it's not you sign up to follow Jesus and it's all sunshine and roses. I mean, in some ways, it's like, yeah, for sure, your life does get better.
Yeah.
But if you read most of the Bible, I mean, the Bible is not a story about or a series of stories about people who did it the right way. It's people who were
hot
thieves
mess
and adulterers and murderers. And like it's literally a book about a bunch of convicts that like God redeems anyways. And so, yeah, you make this conscious decision to follow Jesus, and like, dude, I still like am such a freaking screw up, you know, so it's not like you just turn on a dime and your life is perfect afterwards. It's more of a, in the midst of the imperfections, you have a central beacon still that you're following, you know?
Yeah. And that comes with spiritual warfare. Like that's a whole different animal, right? But like, if just the natural elements of life are challenging enough, but then if you can start to put it through a lens of like what's going on. I just did an episode, right, with a girl who has a really wild story. Pierce introduced me to her too. And she's a new believer. And as we were doing the episode, you know, we're like on, like we are right now, you know, like live and lights, camera, action. And I was like, I got to tell her something, but I didn't do it during the episode, you know, because I didn't want to be weird, you know? So like I Maybe I should have, but maybe I'm doing it now. I don't know, but like we end, like we'll conclude here in a few moments. And I was like, hey, I know this is kind of odd, but like, I want you to know that the moment that you became a Christian, because we talked a little bit about it, that like you are now on the most wanted list. Like you set off an alarm in hell. And I think this is true for everyone, but like particularly for you, Erica, because of some of the things that I know are in your story that are going to be used for his glory. And the devil is like super duper pissed about that. And I have been an absolute threat to this dude. And I am on a hit list. I mean, the amount of times that he has tried to take me out, like physically kill me and or ruin me, is uncanny. I could tell you story after story after story, and it's because I'm like Jason Bourne for the kingdom, dude. You know what I mean? Like I am a mofo, So and I wasn't being like this about it, but I was just sort of saying like, just know that you've caused some problems, in the underworld, and you're gonna have to deal with that. And she was like, "This is quite crazy. You're telling me this because it's been like so hard." And I'm like, "I know, right? Like it's crazy hard." So I think it's important that believers come together and sort of fortify each other and have each other's back, not in just the four walls of the church. And I'll pray for you, brother, but like on the public domain in settings like this.
Yeah, for sure, man. And the more vulnerable I am about my own insecurities, my own shortcomings, the more those around you are like, you know what, dude? Yeah, me too. Like we're all just faking it, trying to pretend like we got it figured out for each other. Like, but inwardly, everybody's feeling the same things. So
Struggle's real. Yeah, the struggle's real. I think that's actually what has ruined it. Like part of the brand that we have to like rebuild is that there's a generation of believers and Christians and proclaimed people that say, "Oh, I'm that," but they weren't vulnerable, they weren't open, and then the skeletons came out of the closet. The underbelly was shown, and then it ruins the thinking because you're like, "Well, you're full of shit." You know what I mean? And it's like, hey, I learned in leadership, let people know early that you're flawed because it's gonna come out. And I try to just be like, this is my personal faith, and I will be screwing it up the entire time, but I will also not be apologizing for having it. So you just do what you got to do, boo boo. Because like that's me.
yeah, it's a good way of putting it, man, for sure.
I'm a cursing Christian, so I say I'm going to offend you either way. Like if you're a holy roller, then you'll probably be upset by my cursing, and if you don't have a capacity for my faith. But the one thing that really does kind of chat my ass is like, and I understand what's really going on, so I don't spend too much time on it, but the amount of persecution that comes with being a Christian is pretty wild, because there is no other religion, no other faith that anyone would have the guts to like demonize and be like, I can't believe you told everyone you're Jewish. Like nobody would ever say that. You know what I mean? Or be like, hey, don't share that you're Muslim because there's other people in there that are Christian.
Yeah.
Said no one. You know what I mean? But then we're supposed to be like not saying that we're Christian. And anyone that has real capacity for life and leadership and like this thing called life is perfectly comfortable with another person having a different faith. Like that does not offend me that you're not a Christian, and
Yeah.
it actually offends me that you're offended. I'm offended by you being offended. Like it's kind of wild, right?
Yeah. I wonder if that's like maybe not uniquely, but more of an American thing in our current cultural moment. Because I agree with you, it feels very much that way of like Christians should keep it to themselves, but
Right.
everybody else, like you
Right.
can't defend them. Like everybody's in their kind of protected sphere or whatever. But maybe Christians are not offered that same consideration, and maybe that's because at least on like a census form, probably most of Americans would call themselves Christian. So
Right.
being the majority, you're not offered those same courtesies often. But
You're saying that really well, Hayden. I would say that. very differently. That was a very
Trying to
like,
be
bro, you
correct
did
here.
good. You done good, kid. You just threaded a needle.
You tell
Like I
I'm
was
like
like
choosing my words very carefully.
very carefully. I was like, I can stop the recording if you need, but that was really well said. It is, I think, 100% that, right? That there's been this ironic twist where we say power to the people. We want to hear the majority. And then we go, wait a second, you're the majority? And it's like, wait, what? Like that's how the whole thing's set up, is to say, is 51% of people thinking this? Then we probably go with that, right? And they're like, no, 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 we need to talk to the 1% and have that control everything else. And it's like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. Not
Yeah.
really.
We'll save that for another day, but
That's a whole nother podcast
that's a
episode,
whole
man.
other thing. Yeah, there's actually different platforms for that entirely. Yeah.
Fair point.
That doesn't make Spotify and Apple. That makes
Yeah,
one of those extreme
real
ones.
quick.
Right. But I do think, it's important as Christians and as leaders, and maybe the combination thereof, to be appealing without being wish-washy. So my thing is like, I'm not going to apologize, but I'm also not going to be distasteful to where you're like, ugh. So I think Christians need to like level up their worldly skills, and their secular skills, because it's like, dude, you are killing it in that little church, in that little town where nobody gives a shit. And you're just in this homogenous circle of like-minded people. You are reaching nobody. Everyone's just got their flashlight. They're pointing it towards each other. Well, why don't you take that into dark places? So that's something that I'm growing through. And man, that's a tough place to be, because it's like, where do I preserve and reserve my faith, but also have some appeal and people feel comfortable? And typically people that have different beliefs, I have found, are okay with me, but I'm a little bit like, I can be edgy, so then it might rub them the wrong way.
Yeah, it's one of the things I've really enjoyed about corporate America, so to speak, is like, obviously a lot of my colleagues have different faiths and different backgrounds. Some of them don't have any faith. Some of them are Jewish. Some of them are. You know what I find out? We all get along really well. We all like each other. We all play golf together. We go on trip. Like, we have fun with each other. And like, I feel like there's this perception maybe that you get online of like, these two groups are opposed and they don't like. But I'm like, all the Jews I know like are cool dudes, and I think they would probably say the same about me. Like, all the Muslims I know, the same thing. All the atheists I know, like, we get along really well. Like, like, yeah, we believe different things, but like, I have yet to have that like awkward moment.
Yeah.
Corporate setting. So I don't know. It is interesting.
Yeah.
It's you know what it is. It's the media, big media, hyping us up to make us all think that the other team is mad and upset. And I'm sure that does happen.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens nearly as much in the real world as we probably see on TV.
No, and I think that's why we have to storytell, even moments like this conversation on this podcast in this moment matters, because with the proper context, it's like, those white guys in their 30s aren't that bad. I thought I hated white men.
Actually, okay.
They're fine. We're good, dude. We're cool. Not cool like we're cool, like you and I are cool. I've been told I get away with murder because I say things that are pretty radical and have enough sort of, I don't know, like the way I say it, but I also know a lot about culture. I've lived in a lot of different arenas. So I'm kind of this walking paradox where I know socioeconomically what life is like down here. And I also sort of transcended up to the Ivy League and to business and the country club. And so it's like, I almost don't exist in either of these worlds. It's kind of hard because I'm like, I don't really like either of you guys,
I like Theo Vaughn, man.
Yeah, man. Theo Vaughn's my boy, dude. He's so funny the way that he can navigate those worlds.
Yeah. It's like, dude from the sticks of Louisiana, but now he's like interviewing the president of the United States and like Talk about both ends of the spectrum, man. It's crazy.
Fun fact: so I moved here 3 years ago,
Okay.
and right down the street here is the Florida Theater. It's this really cool theater, cool venue.
Hmm.
My wife and I went and saw Ray LaMontagne there, and
Nice.
it's really awesome venue. I'm kind of gearing up like to think about how we might do an event there at some point and build towards it. But nonetheless, Theo Vaughn was coming to town, unbeknownst to me. If I had known, I would have went. In fact, I saw him live right
Oh,
before COVID. It was like a week before COVID.
oh. Uh, that's before he was like super famous too.
Yeah, and I'm going to get lunch, right? So his show's at night. I'm going to get lunch, and I'm walking back from lunch, and the bus pulls up, and he steps off, and there's nobody there. It's just him and like a couple of his guys and me, and I'm like 10 feet from him. I'm like, "Yo, gang, gang," and we start talking for the next like 10 minutes.
Really?
It's
I
pretty
bet he's
cool,
just the
man.
nicest guy.
Super cool. And there was this moment, and I don't know, maybe I'm just being fangirl here or something, but for the first couple minutes, he just did what you do when a fan is with you. It's like a fourth wall, So like, oh yeah, like kind of do you want to push?
Script, yeah.
And I just said a couple things to him that were just like just shot through that wall, and I watch him literally just like pull the veil down,
Yeah.
and then we talked for the like next 10 minutes. And what had happened was in the show in DC, he was on stage. He was recently sober, and he just was struggling to like pick up his next train of thought.
Hmm.
And everyone loved him, so we all cheered for him. But I mean, the whole thing probably was like a minute, you know what I mean? But it was just sort of like, I mean, he's a wordsmith, right? So like he's a stream of consciousness. So watching Theo Vaughn live, like be speechless, was just like a weird thing, where everyone's kind of like, and he's
What's
like
going
kind of
on?
like shaking it off.
Yeah.
And I said, hey man, like I said, hey, I know this is kind of weird. I just met you. I said, but I saw your show in DC right before COVID hit, and you were struggling. And I want you to know that I know the amount of pain that it requires to go to the places that you go to find the humor in it. And that a lot of people in that room don't know that. They're yuppies that are your audience that have had relatively easy lives, and no, not knocking them, but like they don't know where you're going in the darkness
Hmm.
to find. And like I just said that to him. I don't know. I just said it like I just did to you, and he just was like, "Yeah, man." And then we end up talking. So I've got a video with him and a picture. And my kind of goal, like big goal, is to grow
Oh yeah.
the brand to the point where it's like, hey
Good Lord,
man,
man.
5 years ago, you and I, here's the picture.
You need to get him on the podcast, man. Full
Would that be
circle moment.
sick? Yeah. So I'm putting it out there right now, but at some point, like we got to get to where I'm talking to him and where he's going. I don't know that he'd even remember me. I feel like he would though. Like I would be shocked if he
Yeah.
didn't. I think he'd be like, I remember you did. Like we talked there for 5 minutes with nobody else around. And it wasn't like after a show when you're
Yeah.
just surging with like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
here's a picture. I mean, it was just this weird thing in the middle of the day, hours before his show. So again, it could just be fangirl, and he's like, I don't remember you, dude. Like, get in line, But I think he would. I don't
I
know
bet he seems like the kind of guy that would.
because I just like spoke to a thing that I don't think a lot of people would understand because I have used humor to cover up all my pain, So I can relate, and I'm not particularly funny in this moment, but like I can be where I say crazy shit like him, and
Yeah.
people are kind of like, "Where'd you get that?" I'm like, "Well, my
Yeah.
brain's kind of whack," So
Dude, I feel you, man. Mine is I make jokes when I feel uncomfortable or when there's like a hard topic. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make a joke out of this, and it's at like wildly inappropriate times. Probably nothing has caused more marital strife than me making a joke in a very serious moment, and my wife is like, "You have got to stop doing that. Like, not okay." I'm like,
did we
get out
marry the same
myself.
person? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's 100% how my wife is. She's like, "You can't," and I'm like, "But I just had to because
it's how God made me. I can't help it.
Right. I am what I am.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, man. I've really enjoyed hanging out with you and having a
Like,
conversation. I look forward to doing more of it. Are there any ways that I can support you in this moment, or that listeners can follow you, or I know that you're not like out here just as a social media influencer or anything, but just anything anything I can do for you.
no, man. I mean, I'm like I said at the beginning of this podcast. I do host a podcast, and so I know the thought and effort and intentionality that goes behind having a platform and inviting someone else into that, and wanting to choose your guests wisely. And so, being considered for this and being given the opportunity to have this conversation was not something that I took lightly, and I'm really appreciative for it.
Right on, man. I'm humbled by that. And tell our listeners about your podcast. What's it about? Where can we find it? Yeah.
A lot of them, it would bore them to tears. It's a very, very niche
Niche.
podcast
Yeah.
called the PEO Pod, and not a great name, but
I
I
love
was
it.
going to do PEO Insider. Well, that was taken and copyrighted. And then I was going to do the PEO Podcast. Well, turns out there was one of those too that some guy did like 4 years ago and did one episode. I'm like, well, can't do that. So it is a really just a podcast that is specifically geared towards my industry, which is the PEO industry,
Right.
and just helping, like, so many people don't even know what it is. Like I worked for a PEO for 6 months before I really knew what it was that we did.
Right.
So I invite people who sell it to talk about it. I invite people who are clients of a PEO to talk about it. A lot of PEO brokers or channel partners exist, and so I invite them to come just talk about their journey and kind of what the PEO industry has meant to them. And like I said, 95% of your audience, it would maybe bore them to tears, but if anybody's interested in listening to that, then there's
I
a
love it.
podcast that exists for that.
Yeah, right. I love that, man. And one big part of what we do, it's actually been the main thing all these years, is our people ops solution. So we kind of operate similarly to a PEO, but we don't take the employer of record. We're strictly in advisory and build the tech stack and the combination thereof. But we place clients with PEOs. So you and I will have to have an offline conversation to see how maybe there
Let's
might
go.
be partners. Yeah.
I love it, dude. That's awesome. Didn't know that.
Cool, man. Well, tell your wife I said thank you. I know that it is a lot to entertain the kids in the house for this long, and
She's the real champ.
yeah, she is, man. I can tell. So I look forward to connecting with you more, man. And thanks for being on today.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. Have a good one.